All right, great. So welcome to week 3 of the keto and mental health class. I've been doing keto diet for mental health. I've been working with Dr. Georgia Deed. She's out of Massachusetts. She's a psychiatrist, and she's been doing an excellent job of teaching the class. And this past week was on treatment planning and implementation. So doing implementation has been really a lot of fun learning about it. And so one of the key things that she talked about was dietary quality. So diet quality is super important. And so just we want to make sure that we're getting all the essential nutrients. We want to make sure we get essential protein. So making sure we get enough protein in our diet. We want to get enough carbohydrates, probably limited carbohydrates, and then enough fats. And one of the other things I thought was really interesting is just because keto diet, you can actually gain weight on a keto diet, you can maintain weight on a keto diet, and you can also lose weight on a keto diet. So that's been really interesting for me because most people come to me, they want to lose weight. And so it's been very effective for that, for losing weight. So that's been really exciting. To see that you can, use it in all different ways. So I've been having a lot of fun with it. And so, and then also really what is a keto diet? So when she talks about keto diet, so keto can be any way that just really lowers insulin. So the whole idea on a ketogenic diet is to lower your insulin and enough to turn on some fat burning. So we want to have, be able to burn fat. And what I found is that, when you want to lose weight, burn fat, you can actually eat fat. So that was kind of really exciting that you can actually eat fat and lose fat. And oftentimes losing weight has more to do with cutting out breads and carbohydrates and things like that. But we want to also, the whole thing with keto is to, do ketogenic diet, to develop ketosis. And so what we mean by ketosis is getting your body to burn fat, which makes ketones. And so that's actually really the key. And one of the things that she mentioned in class is that you want to maintain ketosis for a while. It really takes about 6 weeks to get a therapeutic treatment benefit. And I can probably attest to that because I've been playing with these ketones for a while, like just playing, fasting and low carb. And I know I go into ketosis. I don't measure it. And we'll talk about measuring ketones today as well, but to also maintain it for a period of time. And I must say that I haven't been the best at maintaining that. And she really recommended doing it for about 6 weeks. And I could say I'd probably do it for maybe 3 days. And then I might have cookie or, have dessert or something like that. And I do notice it. What I notice, this is a class on mental health. And so I personally, I'm getting more sensitive to when I eat sugar. I'm starting to notice more. And when when I eat dessert, even if I mess up 2 days in a row, I can really notice that my mood is a lot more ornery. And I find that anyway, I want to give this a try and also see if I can maintain that ketosis for a period of time. And she really recommends 6 weeks. And a tool she talks about is getting a calendar and putting a little star on each day to see if you can maintain it. And I'm usually not a very data-driven person, but I think I feel that this stuff is important. And I'm very interested in doing that. So I haven't made it to Fred Meyer's yet to get my stars to put on the calendar, but I'm pretty excited to take the challenge on. And so there's different types of ketones. Has everybody heard of ketones? So hi, Carol, you have to unmute yourself if you want to say something.
Sorry. How do you know when you're in ketosis?
Yeah, so the best way to know if you're in ketosis is to monitor. And so you would want to monitor. So I have a Keto Mojo. You can buy these I thought I could get some from my office, but I haven't found them yet. But we bought one for the office, and you can measure your ketones. You can measure it. There's a breath ketone meter. You can also do a urine ketone meter, and this one's like a blood ketone meter. And so it turns out that the blood one is the most accurate, but probably the most expensive. And so they only really recommend testing your ketones once a day. And Dr. Eid mentions keeping it consistent, and you measure it first thing in the morning. Usually like a couple hours after you wake up, because sometimes when you're first wake up, you can get that what's called the dawn phenomena, where your cortisol level rises, your energy gets going for the day, and it causes your liver to dump some sugar into the body. So sometimes it's nice to wait a couple of hours after you wake up to measure your ketones. But sometimes in the beginning, people want to use the urine strips, which I have never done myself, but I know that they're very inexpensive, and I think you can even get them at Fred Meyer. And then they have a ketone breath meter, which I understand has a high upfront cost, but then it's free after that. And so that's kind of how you measure the ketones. And there's different levels of ketones. And to be honest, I'm just learning. I mean, I've always heard about these things, but I'm learning more about it and how to measure and what's optimal. Because I do think that there's a lot of value, especially for mood disorders, which is the focus of this class. And so if you're just following ketones would be normally in a therapeutic range between 1 and 3. And so if you're not in ketosis, your level is 0. And they say, you just kind of go out of ketosis. And but a mild ketosis would be 0.5 to 1. And when I was a little while ago, when I first started learning about it, the keto mojo, I was fasting, and my ketones were 0.8. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not in ketosis. I thought that was not so good because I had been fasting, but turns out I was in a mild ketosis. And then, but moderate ketosis, which is really where they have the most, I guess, therapeutic value. And I think once you start monitoring your ketones, you can see where you benefit the most. But Dr. Eid says she goes for between 1 and 3 for most patients. And then deep ketosis would be between 3 and 5. And that's really probably too much for us, unless you have probably a serious epilepsy or something like that. So there's a lot of options to measure ketones. And once some people will measure their ketones for a while, and then they'll stop measuring because they can tell when they're in ketosis. My friend Laura plays a lot with these ketosis, and she knows exactly when she gets in there. And she's very insulin resistant. And she finds that, sometimes it takes her 24 hours to 48 hours to get into ketosis. So I think the more insulin sensitive you are, maybe the faster you go into ketosis, and the more insulin resistant you are, the longer it takes. So someone that may have, that's very heavy, has a lot of weight to lose, it might take them longer to get into ketosis because there's not a lot of what they would call metabolic flexibility. So your body is able to burn glucose that you eat versus taking your fat stores and burning that for energy. And so sometimes if you're eating all the time, your body isn't used to using your own fat stores. So sometimes there's a training period that needs to happen to get your body to go into ketosis and burn the fat. So I think that answered your question. So again, you can monitor with 3 different devices: the breath meter, the urine strips, and this Keto Mojo is, I guess, pretty popular in the keto world. So that's blood strips. And it is good to look at, the other thing I want to talk about is like how much protein, how much carbs, and how much fat should you have to get into ketosis. And one of the most important factors I find for people with is protein. And so not a lot of people will have cravings. And what I found, one of the secrets to reducing cravings is to increase your protein. And most times we're not getting enough protein. And they say that people with normal, regular health that doesn't, not with poor kidney function or anything, your protein intake should be about 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram. And so what that roughly turns out to be is, see here, is about, if you were 150 pounds, you probably want to have about between 80 and 100 grams of protein a day. And so I think people in general aren't getting enough protein. And so when we're looking at, what we're going to eat, I tell people let's figure out your protein first. And then you do want to have carbs, so low carb diet. And so a true ketosis would be under 20. And so most patients, I tell them, between 20 and 50 carbs a day. And so trying to keep the carbs low, and typically, plant vegetables, leafy greens and stuff don't really have any carbs. So there's not an issue there, but like you would want to avoid the root vegetables and things like that. So potatoes and stuff, those are very high carb. So you want to keep your carbs grams under 50. And then fats, you really don't have to worry too much. So these proteins, fats, and carbs are called macronutrients. And so we want to have your protein to be roughly between 80 to 110, depending on your weight, and your carbs under 50, and then having fat. So if you want to gain weight, you would eat more fat because fat is more calorie dense. If you wanted to lose weight, then you would not want to eat so much fat because you have a lot of body stores of fat already, and we can help burn that fat. But if you're trying to maintain weight, you might consider just an average amount. And so you can substitute in the diet certain fats. You can use healthy fats like MCT oil if you wanted to. Avocados are a good source of fat, olive oil, things like that. So typically, with a modified keto diet, they talk about like a 3-to-1 ratio of your your protein to fat ratio. So, let's see here. Any other questions just yet?
How much MCT oil can you take in a day?
Yeah, so that's a good question too. So MCT oil, what I recommend is start low and go slow, because I had a patient, she took a whole, I think on the back of the bottle, it might say, a tablespoon, 1 to 2 tablespoons to 3 tablespoons a day. But if you take a whole tablespoon right off the get-go, it's probably going to upset your stomach, give you diarrhea and things like that. So I usually say start with like a 1/4 teaspoon and just kind of slowly work up. And you can have, a few tablespoons a day. And Dr. Eid was talking about, sometimes people will have like a teaspoon 3 times a day. So, and it can be very good for energy. It can be used immediately for, caloric input without stimulating your insulin levels. And it does help with brain function as well.
So brain function to help you think more smart, or to have a better mood, or all of that?
All of that. So people often say that they feel more clear-headed, and they are. So I like the analogy of a tiger that's out on the hunt. So he's hungry, he's alert, he's strong, he's fast, and he's out to catch the prey. And then after he eats, he's lazy, he's laying down, he's more lethargic. And so typically when you're in ketosis, people say that they do feel a lot more energy. The ketones do burn cleaner than your glucose. And so the brain actually almost prefers to use ketones rather than glucose. I guess there's some certain areas in the brain that need glucose, but the brain really does well on ketones. And so I'm actually excited myself to be able to feel how it would be to be in ketosis for a period of time, even like say 6 weeks, to see how it would affect your brain function. And when we talk about brain function, we're really talking about, the chemicals in your brain that, serotonin, dopamine, GABA, like all these brain chemistries are really optimized when we have a lower sugar diet and using more ketones.
So you said a few tablespoons of the MCT oil, like a quarter of a cup potentially after a period of working up to it, or
I think
that's 4 tablespoons?
that sounds like a lot to me. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's teaspoons.
Okay, because I started out with like 2 tablespoons a day and it didn't seem to give me any problems.
Oh, well, good for you. I had one patient say that she started off, she took a tablespoon, and then she went out with some friends. An hour later, she was at a restaurant and had her run to the restroom. So, and sometimes, and I think it depends on your health in general, like your gallbladder, how easily you digest things. So, yeah, so that's great. You can tolerate it. I notice it a little bit when I take it. I'll just feel a little, because I think I've been eating, I have to take some gallbladder support supplements when I have a lot of fat.
I don't have cravings, so is that good?
Yes, it is good.
Okay.
I don't think you have insulin resistance, Carol.
I don't. My insulin is down. It's at I think a little 3 or something like that.
Yes. Yep. So yeah, so your insulin is very good. So optimal insulin level is between 2 and 5. And
Yeah.
so
I'm at optimum.
yeah, you are at optimum. So
I try to keep everything at optimum.
yeah, you're doing awesome. So one of the things that when you do, so I always tell people too, like, it's not about only what you're eating, but when you're eating. And so sometimes to get into ketosis, people might have to do a little bit of fasting. And so the intermittent fasting talks about using your, eating window between like 6 and 8 hours optimally. There was a recent study actually that came out that when people did intermittent fasting, they lost weight. And that was only a 12-hour fast. And Dr. Brett Scher was saying, well, that's just normal. Everyone should be fasting for 12 hours, like after dinner, you shouldn't eat and till the next day. So that would be a minimum of 12-hour fast. And just doing that will help you lose weight. And it does help optimize your insulin. And so really it all comes down to keeping insulin optimized. And this class is about optimal insulin in the brain, because the brain can become insulin resistant. And so that causes inflammation in the brain and causes mood disorders. But so when you eat and what you eat, and so just by doing some intermittent fasting can help you go into ketosis as well. So you don't have to fast to go into ketosis, because you can, she talked about like jump starting your ketosis, your ketogenic diet. And she talked about doing a fat fast, which I really actually never had heard of. Like who would ever think of eating fats to fast? And so that's one way to jumpstart ketosis. Another one is just fasting in general with just broth and things like that. But also when you are fasting and doing a ketogenic diet, one of the things that comes up is that you can get like what they call a keto flu, where your body is adjusting and it can give you some feelings of, can give you some anxiety, it can give you irritability, it can give you depression. So different signs and symptoms can happen while your body is changing its metabolic processes. It can be uncomfortable at the cellular level. And so one of the main features that you want to do for that is staying hydrated and keeping your electrolytes up. And I found this, and what I thought was really interesting here is that it's your sodium intake will fall. So one of the key things with insulin is that high insulin levels will cause you to retain water. And so I'm sure everyone's heard like, oh, well, I went on a diet and it was all water weight that I lost. And when you lose water weight, it's really because your insulin is slowing down and your kidneys start to excrete more water. It's true. Like, and what it's doing is you're losing a lot of sodium. And so you want to increase your sodium intake. So using electrolytes can be really important during a fast. And so sodium, potassium, and magnesium are all important for fasting. So when your insulin goes down, the sodium will go down, and then it'll cause the kidneys to try to maintain it. And then it also starts to get the sodium, potassium electrolytes out of balance. So I thought that was really interesting, actually. I had to ask her a couple questions about that, just because it brings into effect your adrenal hormones. So when you're fasting, it causes a lot of stress as well. And the adrenals also help regulate your electrolytes. So it is good to take an electrolyte supplement during a fast and also during a ketogenic diet. And so what I found myself doing lately after this class is we have some salt. And so during the day, I'll just take some sea salt and I'll put it in my mouth. And then I've been drinking more electrolytes as well. But salt is not bad. So can actually be good. I'm going to ask you to unmute, Jan. She's trying to say something.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I hesitate to ask, but what is NCT oil?
Yeah. MCT oil is a derivative of coconut oil. So MCT oil is called a medium chain triglyceride. And so it is, so in the old days, back in, back 20 years ago, I remember I wrote an article on the benefits of coconut oil, and taking coconut oil can actually help you lose weight. And so I used to take it like a tablespoon at a time at that time, but now they've refined it. And so one of the main ingredients is the reason why the coconut oil is so good is because of the medium chain triglycerides. So it's called MCT oil. And so a lot of companies now will sell MCT oil. And the MCT oil is very easily digested. And so it goes right in and it can be used for energy, and it helps your body make ketones. And so sometimes if you're doing a ketogenic diet and you're trying to increase your ketones, like, oh, my ketones aren't high enough, what can I do? One thing that you can do is take some MCT oil, because that'll help make some ketones. They also have these ketone supplements that you can take. They're called beta hydroxybutyrate, so BHB, these BHB supplements. And sometimes I haven't had much experience with them at all. I actually just recently talked to a couple of my patients about taking them. I've never taken one myself yet, but these ketone salts help to increase your ketones. And so sometimes at the beginning of a fast, while you're training your body to go into ketosis, they can help support that. And there's been some current research now on ketone supplements for people with Alzheimer's disease and other neurological disorders, because they can be very helpful for the brain. Yeah. So, any other questions?
As we're supposed to be decreasing our carbs, so if I were to eat something that had fiber in it, but it also had carbohydrates, do you subtract the grams of fiber from the grams of carbohydrates, and you get the total amount of carbohydrates after you subtract the fiber?
Yep, so that's called net carbs. And so I have seen that. So people say, total of 50 carbs a day. Well, then say something has 20 carbs in there, but it has 7 grams of fiber, then it would be a net 13 carbs.
So you would only count the 13.
You can count the 13. That's why like vegetables don't have a lot of carbs per se, because there's so much fiber. And like blueberries, the berries do have carbs, but they have a lot of fiber, so they don't count as much.
Okay, so I have a question. I had pizza last night, which had some carbs, but I also had a lot of zucchini. So you can subtract the fiber from the zucchini from the carbs in the pizza, right?
No.
You can't, oh, it has to be in the same food?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah. So a certain food has like net carb. Yeah. You don't get to compound them.
You don't get to have a big salad with your pizza.
Yeah. To counteract carbs. Yeah.
I just don't understand why,
Say that one more time.
I don't understand why you couldn't subtract the carbs from some other food from the,
It's a good question. I have never heard that before, so I'll have to, because I think it's like the food itself. But I get, I think what you're saying is if I eat it together with this, well, it is true, I guess, like bread with butter is better than bread on its own, because the butter does help slow the digestion. And I know that if you use like vinegar with your potatoes, vinegar itself will help slow the digestion of the carbs. So, but I wouldn't use, and as a general rule, I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, well, I'm having pizza, it's this many carbs, I'm gonna add this much fiber to it.
but you could put zucchini on your pizza.
Yeah, well, it does probably help. It does make it a healthier pizza. That's for sure. But I'm not sure if it helps overall counteract the pizza. Yeah. Okay. So let's see here. This is Thomas, I'm not sure. I have 2 Thomases now. Okay. Any other questions? So I think one of the main thing is, having essential nutrients. So there are foods, she talks about having their anti-nutrients. So some foods can be considered anti-nutrients. And so the anti-nutrients might be something like, well, she talks about gluten. So gluten has anti-nutrients, and beans will have anti-nutrients in it. So they can be not as healthy, because say like beans have the lectins in it that help damage the gut. And so there are anti-nutrients. And I did read actually that white rice was better than the other types of rice because it takes out the anti-nutrients. So white rice might be better than brown rice in regards to that from a keto standpoint. She talks about excluding ingredients that damage the brain, and these would be refined carbohydrates, vegetable oils, and processed ingredients. So I have read a lot about vegetable oils. So vegetable oils are very highly processed, and so they're really not healthy, and they actually do more damage and cause more insulin resistance.
Would avocado oil be an okay oil, or do all vegetable oils cause trouble?
Yeah, I think the avocado oil is good. I think they're talking more about like canola oil, soy oil, things like that, they really have to do a lot of extracting to get the oils. And then you don't want those hydrogenated oils at all. Those are really bad for you. Good questions. Thank you. So yeah, I usually talk for about a half hour. And so then I open it up for questions and Q&A. So if you have any questions, let's keep it going. I'm here for you guys. I'm going to actually stop recording here.